This is K.M. Weiland, and you are listening to the 203rd episode of the Wordplay Podcast. By now, you've probably gathered that I am having way too much fun with my work in progress storming. I feel like I have grown so much as an author and a person while writing the previous two books, and storming is now reaping the benefits. To some extent, I think the ease and the fun of this project is due to the project itself. It's a fun, lighthearted romp without my usual huge, complicated, twisty backstory. It features one main POV and one very small additional POV, so it's just an easier story to write, but it's also the first story that has benefited from its very inception from my own growth into understanding plot and character art structure, scene structure, and a perfected outlining approach. I'll tell you what, it makes all the difference. Is your story suffering from the montage effect? The latest post in the video series on my blog warns against summarizing your story's best scenes. To watch it, visit my website at www.helpingwritersbecomeauthors.com. New videos are posted every Wednesday. And now, I hope you enjoyed this week's podcast. Are you overthinking your first draft? First drafts are our agony and our ecstasy. This is where our glistening ideas spill onto the page. This is where we get to play around with our ideas, see our characters grow, and our themes mature. First drafts are fun. They're our creative playground. But they're also tough. Our words on paper rarely measure up to the sparkling perfection of the ideas in our heads. We run into plot holes, creative blocks, stubborn characters, and personal doubts. We want so badly to get our first drafts right, both on the general principle of wanting to do our story justice and to spare ourselves the work of intensive edits later on. And this is where we can run into problems. We can start getting all obsessive-compulsive about creating a perfect first draft, and we end by totally psyching ourselves out. It's not a pretty picture. I admit it. I'm just a tad obsessive and compulsive and perfectionistic. Bad combo. Up until my first book, A Man Called Outlaw, was published, this wasn't such a problem. I just wrote for myself, so I was putting way less pressure on the process of that first draft. But after I came to that always shocking realization that real live readers were actually reading my words, something painful started happening. By the time of Outlaw's publication, Behold the Dawn's first draft was already completed, so it didn't suffer the wrath of what I like to call first draft fallout, but Dreamlander and my not yet published historical novel, The Deepest Breath, sure did. So what was happening to me? Mostly it all boiled down to one fear-inducing word: overthinking. Instead of letting my words just pour out of me whenever I sat down to write these first drafts, I instead sat there and thought. And thought. And thought. Write a paragraph. Read it. Think about it. Obsess about word choice. Obsess about how the characters are coming across. Fuss about thematic implications. Drive self crazy. Rewrite paragraph. Sit and stare at screen. Write a new paragraph. Sound painful? It is. I'll bet it also sounds super familiar to a lot of you. Authors are under a ton of pressure to get it right, and instead of being mitigated, once you have a reading public, it only gets worse. Not only do we have to write something that's good enough to compete in an increasingly competitive marketplace, we also have to write something that will optimally keep us from gathering too many scathing reviews on Amazon and Goodreads. So instead of sitting at our desks and thinking about our stories, we sit there and think about how to be an awesome writer. I'll let you in on a little secret. This is not a good plan. How to be an awesome writer is a great way to instead discover how to write a pompous, lousy, unfun, totally difficult first draft. Fiction is an amalgam of art and craft. we can think about craft. We should think about craft. Craft is an analytic left brain exercise. Art, on the other hand, is a deeply subconscious emotional journey. We shouldn't think too hard about that, at least not while we're in the act. Thinking too hard dries up the creative side of the brain and dams up that subconscious flow of ideas, words, and images. The result? A miserable writer and a tough and probably bad first draft. So how do we fix this all too prevalent problem? The answer is simple. The implementation, however, isn't always so easy. The great Richard Bach, in his short story and essay anthology, A Gift of Wings, spells it out. It took time to learn that the hard thing about writing is to let the story write itself, while one sits at the typewriter and does as little thinking as possible. It happened over and over again, and the beginner learned, when you start puzzling over an idea and slowing down on the keys, the writing gets worse and worse. For me, the cure came when I started in on a major rewrite of Dreamlander. I was closing in on a deadline, and quite frankly, I just didn't have the time to sit and think about every paragraph. I sat down and I wrote. My fingers flew across those keys. It felt like a miracle after those 2 pulling teeth first drafts I'd just finished, and it made me realize 2 things. 1, my writing was fun again. And 2, my writing was better again. As soon as I stopped overthinking my process, my infernal internal editor shut up, my characters started talking to me again, and my writing improved vastly. Turned out the very thing I thought was helping me be a good writer was holding me back. So, will resisting the urge to overthink produce a better first draft? Yes. Will it produce a perfect first draft? No, but that's what editing is for. Editing, as a left brain aspect of the process, is supposed to be thought about. The first draft isn't. The first draft is the place to smear your raw creativity onto the page. Don't worry about being awesome. Don't worry about being perfect. Just have fun. Live your story. Find your awe. Don't think too hard about what you're doing until after you've done it. Thank you for listening to the Wordplay Podcast. To read a transcript of this episode, you can visit my website at helpingwritersbecomeauthors.com. And be sure to check back again next week.